since Connie introduced our panelists already, I'll just let her give a 2-minute breakdown of who you guys are and where you're at before we get talking about data. And I want to reinforce the importance of, I think, this panel and this event in general. Martha stole my thunder earlier by talking about how Obama was on The Daily Show and talking about customer experience right alongside issues like, the backlog of complaints with VA. I'm sorry, Tom, Alan is here somewhere. He's going to have to answer that. But and other really important issues. And I think that really suggests that you guys are at the precipice, the forefront of a really important pillar of this administration as it closes out. So with that, Dennis, kick us off. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing.
Sure. So my name is Dennis Alvord. I'm the Executive Director of the BusinessUSA initiative. If you haven't heard of BusinessUSA, it's a business assistance and customer service initiative. We were created by a presidential memorandum in October of 2011 with really 2 main tasks. To make it easier for businesses and entrepreneurs to discover and access really the cornucopia of resources that the federal government has available to help businesses to be successful from literally dozens of federal departments and agencies across the government, as well as to improve the customer experience, to provide a level of customer service that's more on par with what our businesses are used to experiencing in their private sector interactions. So like my colleague Ruby was saying earlier, if customer service is baked into the Social Security Administration's DNA, it's literally part of the charter for BusinessUSA. In fact, the presidential memorandum that came out establishing the BusinessUSA initiative said that we should endeavor to design with the customer in mind. And we've actually taken that very, very seriously. So customer experience and customer service is very much a part of everything we do at BusinessUSA.
I like the word use of cornucopia. Very good. Very impressive. Stephanie.
Stephanie Thum. I'm the Vice President of Customer Experience at Ex-Im Bank. I'm part of Chairman Hochberg's senior team. I've been with the bank for about 3 years, and I joined from the private sector. I'd worked in private sector customer experience, business development, and marketing for about 24 years before I came to the bank. And the private sector experience that I brought to Ex-Im, I think, has helped us to push forth in how we measure, monitor, and elevate data within the organization and make improvements in customer experience.
Yeah, I'm Rick Parrish. I'm Forrester's Senior Government Customer Experience Analyst. So it's my job to basically keep track of what's going on in the federal space on CX and bring a lot of other government and private sector CX expertise to bear on that space to help federal agencies improve. As far as measurement goes, one of the big things I'm working on right now is a big piece of research on our Customer Experience Index that is really helping me identify some of the drivers of customer experience. We'll talk more about the importance of measuring drivers, I'm sure, as we go on. But that's one of the big things I'm working on right now, as well as, yes, rating which agencies are doing really well and which have a little more room to improve.
We definitely do want to talk about who's doing well and who's doing not. I expect a lot of you could guess who's doing not, but we'll hit that up, and you'll know why I say that in a second. Now let's talk a little bit about where data is driving customer experience. I want to start with Stephanie, I think, on this one, because you guys are very data-driven. It's all about metrics, and you guys have really good metrics to measure that really sort of tell you where you're at, right, as opposed to the mission, right?
Right. Well, of course, the mission drives data. What was it? You said something in your
mission-driven data.
Mission-driven data. Okay. Right. So Ex-Im Bank has a strategic goal to improve the ease of doing business for customers. This is part of one of our foundational documents for the bank, and as part of that, we have figured out, okay, what are the metrics that matter as we've started our CX program? And because the mission has to do with improving the ease of doing business, we've really focused in on customer effort. That is an external measurement, but we also have to bring internal measurements and metrics to the table as well to help to balance the reality and the perspectives. Being a government organization and the needs and expectations of customers sometimes aren't necessarily in balance. So externally, it's about customer effort, and internally, we measure and monitor and elevate data surrounding cycle times. Cycle times being the amount of time that transpires between when a person submits an application, not necessarily a complete application, but an application, to when the bank has made a decision. So that's kind of the easiest way to think about it. We have a few different lenses that we view cycle times through within the bank, and it helps us to keep our finger on the pulse, so to speak, of customer experience from an internal as well as external perspective.
Now, that's something, too, that's improved over the last 2 years, too. You guys have gotten your cycle
Yes.
times down.
Yes.
And everyone's a stakeholder, correct? I think there was a discussion earlier on the previous panel about how it's important to have that internal feedback as well. And you guys basically let everyone get into that.
Right, right. Every employee has access to real-time cycle time data within the bank. So our employees, of course, they have a stake. They have immediate access to cycle time data within the bank. With respect to how we've shown improvements, just to give you an example, in FY09, 57% of cases were turned around in 30 days or less. As of June 30th of this year, 92% of cases have been turned around in 30 days or less. So measuring, monitoring, and elevating that data so that it's viewed by our senior leadership team and also available to our employees has helped us to keep our eye on the ball.
Dennis, you have a lot of different instances of data collection as well. Tell us a little bit about what you're up to.
We do. In fact, so using data is the starting point for everything we do at BusinessUSA. You know, as a startup initiative, we've made sure that we've based the development of the initiative on strong analytics. And what we've done is to create a multi-channel customer service platform that consists of a website, a customer contact center, and various other customer touch points. And the starting point for each new product and service that we've developed and launched has always been based on data and customer input. So I think it's very important to gather that data, and as Martha said earlier, talk to your customers ahead of time. You can learn a tremendous amount from just talking to a few customers and getting their feedback and input. You should get it at the front end before you design something. You should get it after you launch a new product and service to have a reality check and find out how well that new product and service is working. And then you should continue to monitor and gather feedback over time. I think what we've found is that it's really helpful to have a mix of different data streams coming in. So you want to be holding usability sessions when you launch new products and services to find out if they work as you intended. You want to have focus groups at the front end, both in helping you to design your products and services and then to assess how well they're working later on. And then you want to have real-time data. You want to use Google Analytics to monitor your website. You want to have feedback coming in through your other customer service channels. We mentioned some of the common analytics that are used to monitor call center effectiveness and efficiency. And you need to be on top of that data at all times and be using it to make strategic decisions. I think BusinessUSA has seen time and time again that the path to improving customer satisfaction is to listen to what the customers are saying and mind the data and mind the information. One great example of that I like to share is we're a startup. We launched the website 90 days after the president issued his memorandum in February of 2012. In our first year of operation, we had about 10% of folks coming to us as mobile users. In our second year, we saw that climb to 20%. Wow, that's a trend that we're paying attention to now. By our third year, that was over 30% of our traffic was coming to us through mobile users. Of course, the website is our primary platform. As a greenfield, as a startup, we had the advantage of being able to use some of the nice technological bells and whistles. We went with a responsive design website, so we were able to address that user need right away. But it also led us to make the strategic decision and make the investment in creating a mobile application. It's about meeting your users where they want to be to increase and enhance their customer satisfaction. So data is critically important to really all the decisions that we make at BusinessUSA.
Right on. Rick does a lot of research in this arena. This is his subject of expertise, and I think if you don't look at his research, you should. You have an interesting take on where data is working and where it sometimes points to maybe you shouldn't even be bothering with some of these outreaches. I'd love to hear some more on that.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I done some research recently, especially on digital customer experience in government, and we've heard from some organizations today that are really basing what they're doing with digital CX on data, right? The great stuff that Rajiv and Ruby talked about at IRS and SSA earlier, you guys, and Brenda Wenzel this morning as well. The important thing to remember, though, is that in my research, I found that most federal agencies out there aren't really doing much with customer data at all before they decide what digital touchpoints to build, what they decide to spend time and money and resources on. And so as a result, you get all kinds of digital touchpoints out there that end up being a waste. I'm not going to embarrass anybody in particular, but suffice to say, you can find hundreds of federal YouTube channels out there that people are spending time and money populating with videos about, information about services and what we're doing for you and this and that have like 7-page views, since 2012.
Not the best investment.
This is not the best investment, and this is not being driven by customer data, right? This is being driven by the fact that they have an intern who likes YouTube, right? Or something like that, right? And they're wasting taxpayers' money and their own time and resources. So that's one thing, and also as a result, and a lot of time these digital channels, my data shows, is that the customer experience on a lot of these digital channels isn't very good. And so it turns out, and this is a little counterintuitive, especially given the great stuff we've been hearing so far, but it turns out that only 41% of the American public says they want the federal government to do more with digital. Less than half. Now, it differs. That's federal level data, right? Individual agencies, you see people saying, yes, we love digital, do more. And other agencies, I'm saying, hardly anybody saying. But at a federal level overall, it's only 41%. It's less than half. And the reason why is because they're not having good experiences with the digital touch points that they're interacting with. And so we're hearing today from the people who are doing a great job. Unfortunately, that's not the norm yet, but we'll get there.
Right. Like I said, we're starting the conversation now. I think it's happening.
Exactly.
So what are some of the challenges to taking in data? I think we've heard cultural issues sometimes in that when you're coming in and doing some change in an organization, it doesn't always happen. You were in a startup organization, basically, so Dennis, you might have had a little more leeway coming in, but you had some cautionary tales, I remember, in speaking with you prior to this, that you could share a little bit. I want to hear some of the challenges that you guys have had.
Sure. Well, I think some of them were alluded to previously. I think, there are certain cross-cutting federal requirements that we all have to address and deal with. Martha invoked the Paperwork Reduction Act, and I'm sure it got some gasps from the federal employees that are in the room because it's sometimes difficult and time-consuming to navigate through that and get to the point where you can actually collect that actionable data that you can do things with. But I think, another cautionary tale, data can be incredibly, incredibly empowering. It can also be really, really frustrating. And what I mean by that is that, sometimes you can use data and pretty quickly and readily identify where a process is breaking down as you do your journey mapping, as you get customer input and feedback. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have the budget and resources to address that customer issue. And we're all operating in a really constrained environment. So I think sometimes it's really hard that you can uncover something through good data and analytics and not be able to immediately take action to remedy that customer issue or that customer complaint. Frequently, there are opportunities to take maybe an incremental approach. So even though you don't have the money to retool your entire business process, you might be able to take an approach where you can start with some training and kind of incrementally get to the point where you can improve those customer pain points over time. So I would say, one caution that I have is that we can't have the expectation that data is going to solve all of our problems. It's only part of it, and there's frequently a business process that has to be addressed as part of all this as well.
I really like what you said, Dennis, about it being an iterative process. And there was a gentleman who asked the question about data in the earlier panel. And with respect to how much data is too much data, it's a matter of bringing something to the table and starting and having a collaborative process around, okay, is this what matters? Is this going to give us the information that we need to take the next steps? And if it's not, go back and do it again. That's just the nature of building a function like CX or anything with respect to innovation in an organization.
With respect to data, what are some of the instances in government that you've seen in your research that's doing well and who's not doing well in that regard? You had some research that's coming out soon, I believe, Rick, that's going to touch more on that.
Yeah, that's the CX index data I mentioned earlier about who's doing better in CX than others. And I won't give you the full list, but I'll tell you who's on top. Anyway, in federal, the National Park Service and the U.S. Postal Service have the best customer experience.
The folks who deliver your mail are on top of customer experience.
That's right.
That's weird to me, but I mean, I'm excited to hear it.
Customers love U.S. Postal Service.
Why is that though?
Well,
without giving away your research in advance.
Sure. Well,
gotta buy
actually,
that.
it does actually come back to the sort of data we're talking about in a way here, because customer experience isn't an end in itself, right? The whole purpose of improving the customer experience is to improve your mission success, right? That's the reason why you do it, and which means that when you measure CX, what you really have to measure are the drivers of what creates a good customer experience. Because, as we've talked about, Dennis mentioned already, Brenda mentioned this morning, cost is a factor here, and there are so many things that you could be doing. You just throw a dart and you're going to see something you could change and probably should change, right? But the fact is you can't do it all. And so really identifying what the most important drivers of a good customer experience are for your organization. And then if you can sort of imagine the sort of standard quad chart, where one axis is the importance of the driver to the customer experience, and the other axis is the amount of resources necessary to do it, right? You can identify that quick win quadrant, where it's the important drivers that are easy to act on, right? And those are the ones that are gonna put you up there on the top, right? You're making change that actually have an effect on the customer experience. Right. And you're going to be doing it with very little resources and oftentimes saving money. Social Security saved money by improving the customer experience. FSA saved money by improving the customer experience. These are the real success stories.
Yeah, and Brenda had a really good point about small wins this morning. Getting that early on and then getting a seat at the table. And that brings me to another question. I have one more question, then I want to open it up to the floor, so start thinking of them. But that is, the governance around the information you collect in your offices, respectfully. When you get good data and decisions that you can do with it, where do you bring it? Who owns that? Do you all have a seat at do you have a seat at the table when you're, and I know you guys have like really, really regular meetings and stuff to discuss this.
Yes, we look at specifically cycle time through a few different lenses. One, I mentioned that our employees have access to real-time data, but every Tuesday morning, there is an operations review committee meeting where we have a dashboard that sometimes is up to 9 pages long of deals that are in process that are taking longer than prescribed service standards. And we triage that. It's not necessarily a policing mechanism, but it's meant to identify where there may be consistent pain points. That's one way, that's deals in process. Then every Thursday I provide for senior management, I prepare a dashboard, a snapshot of the high volume product lines and the average time that those have taken over time. So we have the lens of the real time, we have the lens of deals in process, and we have the lens of deals that have already transpired. And we do publish information in our regular GIPRA report about with respect to cycle times.
So Tuesday and Thursday, don't call you.
You can call me anytime.
I think data transparency is incredibly, incredibly important. And BusinessUSA is an interagency initiative. We actually have an executive committee that's comprised of 24 federal agencies and departments, and we share our performance data on at least a quarterly basis, if not more frequently, with that executive committee. And we invite them to provide us with feedback about how we're doing, and more importantly, how can we improve? How can we continue to build upon this great operational infrastructure that we've created and continue to evolve and have an optimal customer experience?
I'm on the executive committee. It's dynamite. The information is dynamite, and if we're sharing slides, I think that it would be great to
we can learn a lot from each other, and some of the best ideas that I think we've gotten in terms of how to improve and evolve BusinessUSA have come through that interaction and through our partners. It's actually been held up in a GAO report as kind of a best practice in sharing data and information across the federal government in a collaborative manner.
So one of my final questions before I open it up is just, Martha touched on this earlier, but where we go from here, how do you get to the next level? And there's been a lot of good conversation around baking in some of these customer experience processes into an overall strategy. But Is that feasible for everyone? Where do we go from here, and how do we get there? What's a roadmap for us?
Well, I believe that strategy and planning is the next frontier for government CX. I think that there is a lot more room for us to take customer data to the senior leadership table as we're forming our strategic plans and our annual plans. And CX as a profession, it's kind of our Achilles heel. We haven't really brought as much as we could bring to the table, but now we have an opportunity to do that because there's more focus on it as a management discipline now throughout government and the private sector. So I think that's going to be the next frontier. But again, it's about elevating the data. And you can't just do it once. It has to be a continuous process. So building that into the strategic planning process, I think, is going to be something that we'll need to get done. It will save us money. It will save us time and resources if we can encapsulate our customers with our strategic planning process.
I think you're seeing this happen more and more in government, both at the highest levels. Martha mentioned the creation of the community of practice by OMB, where we now have a cross-agency priority goal related to customer service, and OMB is monitoring that goal, and we're all working collaboratively as a government to try to advance customer service as an objective. Kind of from the grassroots level up, you see the creation of a customer experience listserv and a very active community that now has hundreds of federal users across the government. At the departmental level, you see all kinds of interesting and innovative things happening. You're going to hear from VA, you've heard from SSA and IRS and several others today. Great things happening. Within commerce, customer service is there are 5 planks to the commerce strategic plan. One of those planks is operational excellence, and customer service is an important component of that in enhancing customer service. So I think more and more you'll see agencies kind of baking this into their DNA.
I agree.
Any thoughts on that, Rick?
Yeah, I guess I'd offer sort of three thoughts. First, prioritize your CX improvements based on that driver analysis that I mentioned before. There's too much to do. You've got to prioritize it. You've got to prioritize it based on what's going to matter the most to the customer and what you can actually get done within your current budget and other sort of resource structure. So I'd say that's the first thing. The other I would say that I think is starting to happen a little bit more. And by the way, the private sector isn't that much further ahead on this issue, is matching that customer perception data with internal operational data. Because when you match those two up, that's a really powerful insight. For instance, that's just a real easy example. Let's just say that customers are saying that they're on hold for too long in your call center. Well, that's good. That's good to know. But how long is too long? You don't know unless you match that perception data up with your internal operational data. So you can say, it turns out that at 20 seconds, satisfaction with that hold time plummets, which means what we really need to do is get us down to 20 seconds, not 5 seconds, not no seconds, right? But 20 seconds. And that's the sort of thing that's the sort of insight you get when you match the perception data with the operational data, for lack of a better term. And the third thing I'd offer is something that you guys have already referred to here, which is openness. I talked to a lot of federal agencies that are nervous about sharing their CX performance data internally, to say nothing of externally, right? Oh my God, what's it going to show? It's going to show that we're not Zappos, and that's bad. Everyone knows you're not Zappos, believe me. But share it internally. Get the right data to the right people. Not everybody in your organization needs to know every performance metric. It's going to be too much. Right? Dashboards tailored to people in specific roles, and share a lot of that top-line data publicly. People want to know that you care enough to be collecting this information and that you're doing things about it. And it's an opportunity to show what you're up to. Here's the metrics. Here's what we're doing to improve. Right? That's a good news story. I said 3. I'm gonna go 4.
Go for it.
You're getting the whole story.
I'll allow it.
Metrics should also be used, not just as you're saying for these strategic decisions, but everybody in your organization should have performance indicators that relate to their role in the customer experience. Everybody in your organization has a role in delivering a good customer experience, even if they never see a customer, right? And that means that they have some influence over some sort of CX performance. And part of their annual performance review should be performance on some sort of CX related KPI.
That would be interesting to say. All right, I want to allow some time for questions. So I know there's some big intimidating microphones on the front corners of the stage. I want to see who's got the guts to do this. I think we got one. Maybe. Yeah, we do.
All right, well, thank you very much for this information. And Mr. Parrish, you're kind of singing to me because I'm with the Postal Service.
You don't
right?
want to hear me sing.
Well, good to hear what you're saying. And I from the perspective of this push towards everything digital, right? I mean, we're living in Washington, D.C. We're all wired. I have Fios. I have Cox at home. I have my iPhone, my iPad, everything, right? But the rest of the country, there still is a digital divide with respect to broadband availability that is required to navigate some of these websites, to do the level of interaction that you have on your websites. Also, from a security standpoint, I think we're seeing very clearly, you can't really say 100% there's security. So the level of information that is being shared, there are people who do have reservations. And then you do have the elderly. I mean, they're never going to really adapt to this yet, but they have a lot of interplay with CMS, Social Security, IRS. So from that perspective, from the customer experience, where do you see all of you, and I'm going to focus you first on Mr. Parrish, the use of mail in ensuring security and communicating that customer experience with the public?
Right. I think you make a really great point about not everything can always be digital, right? There was a time even a few years ago when one required a lot more sort of a hard copy signatures on things for government business that has now become digital. But you make a very good point. Not everything can always be digital, and not everyone always wants everything to be digital, right? Me personally, I am, if possible, a go to the office or talk to someone in person kind of guy. It's just, I just prefer it myself. And so, by the way, the data does in fact show that millennials do not interact digitally with government at a noticeably higher rate than seniors overall. Yes. Now, this does vary by agency and program, obviously, but at the federal level, it's statistically insignificant difference between the way my parents interact with digital and the way my friends' college-age kids interact digitally with the government. So interesting point there. People often. It's funny, Frank expressed a little bit of surprise that Postal Service would be on the top when,
Just slight surprise.
But the fact is that
He didn't know anyone from Postal Service was here.
but the fact is, I think one of the nice things when I sometimes talk to folks at the Postal Service, and they seem to have a very good handle on not getting overly zealous about digital everything. Like I was talking earlier about so many federal agencies, just digital, everything digital. Customer data doesn't matter. We know people want digital, right? So let's just do it. It seems to me that they have a much more circumspect attitude, and I think that serves them well as they see some colleagues in the government space sort of go maybe a little bit overboard prematurely. I think that sort of more circumspect attitude really serves you guys well in that regard.
Now, if Postal Service had a YouTube channel with videos of postal people getting chased by dogs delivering the mail, I would definitely
Find that on Vine.
just throwing it out there.
I could add to that and say, I think it's about meeting your customer where they want to interact with you. And at BusinessUSA, roughly 20% of our customer contacts are not digital. People are coming to us through other channels. So you have to make sure that you're providing the right level and types of services for the customers that you want. And we've talked about this before. These channels come with different costs as well. So, a chat interaction is more expensive than an email interaction, which is more expensive than a phone call, which is a lot more expensive than someone self-serving on the internet, on a website. So you've got to strike the right balance about providing the right level of service to the customers that you need without having wait times that are too long or other customer pain points, but also being able to operate within your budget.
And your thoughts on that, Stephanie, on that question?
Dennis and I are thinking with the same brain on this. That was almost exactly word for word what I was going to say about meeting your customers where they are and where they need to be.
There's one more little point I just make on that. Millennials again, over half of millennials say that they would rather talk to a person by phone to get their question answered than go to a website.
I think part of that, some of the data that we're finding is they want an instant answer. Like, and it's interesting that we just rolled out chat about 3 months ago, and what we've found is that there's a direct inverse relationship now between the number of emails we're receiving and the number of chats we're responding to. So as chats are going like this, emails are going like this. People want instant information. They want their answer right away and be able to act on that and move on.
Right, and so I think probably the issue here is it's not necessarily that people don't want to use websites, it's that oftentimes, this is a question about
the website doesn't fix it.
The website isn't getting them what they need fast enough. Right now. I can get
And peace of
Amazon to
mind
do
too.
something in an hour.
Like when I call like insurance, when I switched insurance, it was like 2-hour ordeal, and I was so upset to use nice language.
Everybody
and I
has
just
the
wanted
same.
to figure it out, man. And you couldn't do it on a website. You just couldn't get that peace of mind. So.
Just the last point, though, the security aspect of mail is, it's hard to compromise that, whereas putting that kind of personal information online, unless there's absolute certainty of no breach, would be.
Absolutely true, although, that being said, I forget my TSP password 7 or 8 times a year, and it would be nice if I could get that renewed online rather than having to
Give me a call.
We had another question.
Now, so you guys kind of touched on my question I was going to ask. One of the things, we look at is trying to make the case to programs at our agency that good customer service can actually lead to reducing costs, right? And so, for example, let's say you have a business process that's a little bit broken and it leads to a spike in call center volumes, That's an expensive channel, obviously. So I guess if you guys could just elaborate a little bit more on sort of any successes you guys have had in terms of making the case that great customer experience actually leads to reducing costs at your agencies, or if there's any research where agencies have had success with that.
I just wanted to say one thing. As the export-import, you guys have competitors too. So the
Yes.
better customer experience you have, the better satisfaction, the better it is in your competitive against your competition, right?
Most definitely. Yes, Ex-Im Bank does have competitors. There are ECA, other export credit agencies located around the world, and we are mandated by Congress to be competitive with those other agencies.
And I probably totally made you forget what he asked, didn't I? Say that one more time, because I forgot to.
Yeah, so just any successes that you guys have had or any research in terms of how creating a great customer experience can actually lead to reducing costs for programs. Obviously, with agencies, cost reduction, saving money is critical. I think one of the things we're looking at is how can we help programs to save money by providing a better customer experience.
I can't say that we've done that yet, but I can say that we're gathering data that I think will allow us to make better decisions in the future and optimize. We are making better decisions, which I think is ultimately going to result in cost savings for the government. Like the example that I shared earlier about creating a mobile platform, there were people that were telling BusinessUSA and myself that, day one, you need a mobile app, you need a mobile platform. Well, wait, let's give it a little time and see what the data tells us. Do we really need to go in this direction? Do we really need to invest in, coding a new app, maintaining a new platform, or can we best meet our customer needs otherwise? Those unused YouTube channels that Rick was referring to, you really should base your decisions on good data and information so that you can make good decisions for your customers, but also good budget decisions. I think over time, as you can begin to get those trend lines using that data, you can optimize like the mix of services that you provide as well. That should result in ultimately in cost savings.
Anything else you guys want to add to that?
I'd just give you, we already heard one example this morning from Brenda Wenzel from FSA, right? They're saving, and for every year that they're running their single portal rather than that bevy of website cornucopia, if you will, of websites.
Good word usage.
They're saving money, right? They're saving millions every year. Another big success story I like to talk about is the Social Security Administration's Supplemental Security Income Program. They're saving big money. I won't get into the whole story here, but they found that they had a compliance issue with people reporting their income, and so they were paying out too much in unearned benefits. And the reason why wasn't because people wanted to defraud, the Social Security, is because the customer experience around reporting your income wasn't good enough. They improved the customer experience. People report their income more accurately, more often. As a result, Social Security saves big money. on that sort of program. And those are just two examples. All kinds of similar examples from big private sector companies as well that are not agile, are not live, are not Silicon Valley startups. Sprint saves $1.7 billion a year because they did a little project a couple years back where they identified the root causes of why people call their call center, and just they fixed their website so that people could find those answers faster. $1.7 billion a year they save on that sort of thing. There's a boatload of examples like that as well.
That's a pretty positive use case to end our panel on, so I want to give them a round of applause and call them afterwards. I'll talk to you.